Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Yarns with Andy. Today I've got Kieran Mackenzie, all the way from Australia, Sydney. He's the co-founder or founder of Prescient Technology, which is an AI company. Thank you so much for making the time to be here, Kieran.
That's right. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and the company and the vision?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in New Zealand. I was a Hastings boy.
Yeah.
Moved with my family to Sydney in 1997, I think. Did the last few years of school and then went to uni. Did engineering and went to work for Laing O'Rourke's R&D team. So Laing O'Rourke's one of the big construction engineering companies, primarily UK, Middle East, and Australia. And I was working in the R&D team. And through that process, one of Laing O'Rourke's things is safety. So most of these safety systems are online for free, and I encourage everybody to go have a look at those. But the thing that kept coming up in industry is running over people's big yellow things. So it's by far and away the number one cause of serious and fatal accidents in the Australian workplace. So sort of the challenge was put out, how do we solve that? And we were working on this for about 5 years inside Laing O'Rourke, and the decision was made to sort of spin it off because this sort of technology won't win or lose Laing O'Rourke a construction job, so we might as well make it available to everybody. So for my sins, I had to figure out how to do that, pull it out of a big company, set it up as a separate entity and raise venture capital. We managed that, I think it was April 2020, and then hit a pandemic. So that was very exciting times.
Yeah.
But that's
Must
the
be challenging.
of Prescient.
It
was
challenging. Yeah.
Many reasons, not being able to come into the office, not being able to buy anything, not being able to go see customers. So if anybody on the podcast is thinking of doing their own startup, try and time it a little bit better than that.
Not something you can predict, though. Force majeure event.
So I think we're a team of about 25 now. We're all based in Sydney. So we are the developers of basically everything. So AI, software, cloud infrastructure, you name it, we do it all internally. So that's where we're at the moment.
So what's the value proposition of Prescient?
So we build AI vision systems for heavy industries. And what that means is that you can see something, understand what it is, and then do something. And that can be applied in heavy industries in so many different ways. So a safety system is also a monitoring system, a QA system, a reporting system, a productivity system, because it's effectively anything you can do with your own eyes and brain, we can probably automate away. Now, at the moment, we're focused on safety, but you can clearly see how the engineer at the front gate who has to write down the license plates of the trucks and what they are carrying, that's fully automatable these days.
Yeah.
The monitoring, are there cracks in concrete as the precast elements come out of the production line? Again, that's an AI vision system. A safety system to stop people being run over, it's the same thing, running a slightly different AI model. So the proposition is we can make construction or heavy industries more broadly, safer, more efficient, more sustainable, all those sorts of things by using technology.
Oh, wow. It's an amazing vision. You must be one of the first few startup companies that's actually adopting AI in the construction industry. Would you say that's a fair statement?
So there's a few different things. What do people mean by AI? And it's a bit of a pointless buzzword these days. So there's obviously the ChatGPT style AI, which are the large language models. Mm-hmm. There's sort of robotic process automation. Mm-hmm. There are actual robots. So when we refer to AI vision, we mean something that can see something, understand what it is, and do something all automatically.
Yeah.
So yes, AI can do lots of things.
It's the process of data collection, which is automated.
So what we do is we actually pre-train all our models so that an AI system that requires you to be an expert in AI is of no use to anybody in heavy industry. You want to turn it on and say, detect this, and it does everything for you. So we have to pre-train everything. We've got to set up all the business logic. We've got to set up all the reporting and things so that the average user in heavy industries can just turn it on and it works.
Yeah.
Because a lot of this technology is great, but it's too complicated for people to actually use.
Yeah. Are you seeing that there's quite a lot of uptake within the construction industry and they understand what you're trying to do?
There's certainly a lot of interest because everybody wants to know, what is AI? What can it do for me? How does it work?
Yeah.
Construction in particular, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more later, is particularly challenging due to the commercial models, subcontractor, things like that. So the uptake for us has been a lot easier in mining and materials companies because they don't have the subcontractor model. But certainly there's a lot of interest in understanding what it can actually do and sharing that with people. And it's a bit of a journey of picking something that's easy to understand for people and easy to adopt.
Yeah.
So that they can then understand and sort of work through the process. And that's what we've been doing for the last few years.
Well, it's a pretty cool story, mate, and I'm sure you'll do well. Okay.
Thank you.
So, Kieran, what is AI vision from your perspective?
So I mentioned earlier, AI is a bit of a buzzword, and it means many things to many people.
Yep.
So, we were talking earlier about ChatGPT and things like that. All of that is AI. So AI, broadly speaking, is trying to replicate what humans can do.
Interesting.
So an AI vision system, at a very high level, what we're attempting to do is replicate what a human can do with their own eyes and brain.
Mm-hmm.
So they can see something, they can understand what it is, and then they can take action. Now that action could be opening a gate, could be writing something down, it could be stopping a machine, it could be anything. But an AI vision system is basically replicating eyes and brain.
That's a very interesting perspective. I've just never thought of AI that way,
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different sorts of AI. There's autonomous vehicles. They will have AI vision systems on them. There are systems that will take invoices and scan them and then basically extract the information and upload them. And those are sort of optical character recognition AI systems. So there's a lot of buzzwords in there. There's your AI, there's machine learning, there's neural networks, there's things like that. But at a high level, you're trying to replicate what people can do.
Everything that you can see and translate
Correct.
to information. Wow.
And you can see now why there's so many applications for this.
Yeah.
Because there's monitoring, there's security, there's safety, there's QA, QC, because all of these things require you to look at something, understand what that is, and then take action. Now, it could be letting it pass through, it could be taking records, it could be stopping the production line. All of these things are basically the same thing over and over again.
Can you kind of give me 3 examples where that could be implemented in the construction industry that would add crazy value to the industry today?
Yeah, there's a couple of examples, and I'll take some from Langer Rock. Langer Rock does a lot of precast in the UK through their factories.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be great if, as the precast was going through the production line, we could detect, are the rebar placements in the right spots?
Right.
At the end of it, are there any cracks in the concrete? Are there any issues with the facade? How we do that currently is there is a person that inspects it at the end. But if you know what it's supposed to look like, you can say to the AI, that's what I want it to look like, and alert me if it doesn't look like that. So basically everything at every stage can be checked, and you can have a video, you can have the full QA reports associated with that, so that the panels do not even leave the factory. In fact, they don't even progress to the next stage. Now that's been in high-tech manufacturing for a long time,
right.
And that's a pretty established use case. But it's slowly filtering down to construction and heavy industries, where generally it's a much lower price point.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a computer processor versus a concrete panel, very different price points. So that's slowly filtering down to do that. Another example that we have is at the front gate, recording vehicles going in and out.
Yep.
And we had the example of, it would be great to know what was going in and out so that we don't have to have the work experience kid writing it down on a piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
So we could put an AI vision system on the front gate, for example, and it records the truck going in. If that license plate is not allowed to be on site, it says go over there and it calls the security guard. If it is, automatically open the boom gate, truck goes through, it videos the load going in, videos the load going out, timestamps everything, so that when you get the invoice, you can automatically reconcile that against what really happened. Now, there are other ways of doing that, GPS and logistics tracking software, but nothing beats literally a video of the thing that you want to look at. It's a sort of immutable log.
Yeah.
And finally, another example is what we'll be talking about, what we're focusing on is safety.
Yep.
So systems on the back of machines to alert you when a person or other specified object are around you to prevent accidents. So you can alert the operators and you can alert people around saying, there is a person next to you, stop.
Yeah.
It's the same thing for us running different AI models.
Yeah. KiwiRail came up with that technology originally, didn't they? The digital barrier system to stop machinery going into the rail corridor.
Yeah, so the KiwiRail folks, in conjunction with a tech company, forgive me, I can't remember who it was now, we're looking at that. That system has some pluses and minuses. It's quite complicated to set up because you've got to set up barriers to say, if it crosses this area. So we've got a slightly different take, which is around safety. If there's a person there, for example, alert me. I'm sure we'll talk about shutting machinery down, which is an interesting topic.
Okay. But for all of this to be implemented, you've still got to have that AI trained. Yeah?
Yes.
Can you give me insights as to the quantum effort that goes into training an AI model? Is it expensive? Is it time consuming?
Yes, is the answer to both of those. We spent about 5 years inside Langer Rock, and our efforts will never cease. Going from nothing to detecting a person 70% of the time, if you've got an AI engineer, it will take you an hour or two these days.
Yep.
To go from 70% detection of a person to 99.9, however many nines you want there, on a heavy industry site is very difficult. The reason for that is heavy industries are a series of edge cases strung together. There's no equivalent of just driving down the road. There's always going to be some scenario that we've never seen before, and indeed a person's never seen before. So that's sort of point one, is heavy industries are edge cases. It's also very difficult to collect training data because typically you need thousands of hours of video and footage. And if I wandered into a construction site and said, do you mind awfully if I just record everything and use it for my AI training data? I know what the answer is, and it generally ends in something very rude. So it's how do you actually collect that training data?
Yeah.
Then the issue in heavy industries is typically we can't rely on a magical internet connection. So we can't rely on cameras being placed everywhere, feeding it back to a server. So we have to run what's called edge devices. So relatively low power devices that go out into the field or onto a machine. And that means you can't just run infinitely large AI processing models.
Yeah.
So you have to take these potentially millions of images and shrink them down to build a model that will actually work in the timeframes that you're talking about, milliseconds and things like that in the real world. And that's incredibly difficult. The other consideration for heavy industries is there's lots of edge cases that are not obvious what we should be doing. So for example, if I see an excavator bucket, is that a vehicle or is that a vehicle attachment or what category do I put that in?
Right.
Because if an excavator comes around the corner, the first thing I see is the bucket. So maybe that is a vehicle. But if it's sitting on the ground, not attached to a vehicle, then that would get very annoying. There's things like high vis. So if I have a high vis jacket hanging up, it's indistinguishable to a person looking at that, whether or not that's a person, bending over, tying up their shoelaces, or it's a high vis jacket.
Just hanging on a fence.
Yeah. Exactly. So we're always faced in heavy industries with these sorts of issues that don't come up in sort of regular industry. And these are the reasons why heavy industries are so difficult to actually make the AI vision systems work, because they have to be relatively inexpensive. They've got to be very easy to use, and they have to work in these terrible environments that are very difficult from an AI perspective, but also they're hot, they're dusty, they are daytime, nighttime, they're covered in snow and rain and things. That's the challenge, is making them ruggedized for heavy industries.
But here's the risk as well, right? So you've just got to get it wrong once for them to shut you down.
So it's really interesting. There's something called a false positive. And a false positive is, let's say, detecting an object as a person. It's clearly not a person. A false negative is not detecting, let's say, a person that's really there.
Right.
And when I started many years ago, I assumed that people would prefer to err on the side of a false positive because it sounds safer.
Yep.
And that is probably true. If you had 100 detections and one of them was a false positive, nobody really cares that much. But if you had 100 detections and 99 of them are false positives, then people do care. And
it's
the operators,
annoying.
exactly right. And it's functionally useless for the operators. On the flip side, a false negative sounds dangerous, and arguably it is, but it never annoys the operators because whenever it goes off, there's definitely a person there. So you've got this trade-off between potential safety in annoying operators and not annoying operators that actually will embrace using it versus a potential safety issue. And that's why all the AI is adjustable and we update it all the time. But you do have this fundamental issue, which is why we err on the side of caution. And it's back to that high-vis example.
Yeah.
That does not come up in other industries because people don't walk around in high-vis and put their hard hat on the top of a pallet while they're getting warm in the afternoon.
Yeah. Oh, could be high-vis versus a traffic con. and you get it wrong. Who knows?
Exactly.
Hopefully not.
So the other interesting challenge is compared with what? So an AI vision system, our systems are doing it in less than 200 milliseconds from image going in to alerts coming out. So compared with a person, you cannot react that fast.
No way.
So my question is...
Hang on, Lewis Hamilton couldn't react that fast?
Exactly.
Oh, sorry, let me keep it relevant. Oscar Piastri couldn't react that fast?
Indeed. So the question is compared with what?
Yeah.
And if you compared it with a person, it's much faster and probably more accurate. Because what people do is they look at it for multiple sort of minutes or seconds, and they decide what they're looking at, and they look at it from different angles.
See, you're talking about the efficiency of that system, right? And there's no argument there, the efficiency of the system, right?
That's right. Well, it's accuracy versus precision, and how quickly you do it.
But I think you have another challenge there as well. So I have a Honda CR-V. Yeah, that's what I drive around, and it's got adaptable cruise control and it's got lane assist. Yeah, my wife would never use both those functions ever because she just doesn't trust it.
Yes.
So it's how do you then cater to my wife now, right? So who wouldn't then go? I wouldn't go adaptable cruise. Just follow the car in front of me. If the car in front of me brakes, your car automatically brakes. Yeah, you've set the speed limit. It's perfect, right? It's such a simple function. And she goes, I trust my own instincts and my own driving skills greater than that of the AI.
Yeah, I would argue with the wife's driving, whether or not that's true, but you raise an interesting point, which is interaction with the machines.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have a system on a machine and it takes control, not only does the AI have to be essentially flawless, but there are 5 considerations for why you might not want to do that.
Okay.
The first one is, are you introducing bigger safety issues? So if a vehicle takes control, take, for example, a forklift or a telehandler carrying a load. You've got a load that's potentially raised and moving, and all of a sudden the machine stops, and those loads start swinging around. You can tip over machines. The second one, which is to your wife's point, it's really irritating for the people using the machinery.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be useful without being annoying. And the CR-V has obviously gone too far into the annoying without being useful.
For me, it's really useful, though.
Well, the third one is legal.
User-centric. Sorry, keep going. Third one?
Third one's legal. So if we start shutting machinery down or interacting with machinery and something does happen, whose fault is that? So, for example, on the CR-V, if it does something and results in you running into a car,
mm-hmm.
Are you suing Honda because they took control? Or is it your own fault? Or where does the liability lie here? 4 and 5 are actually the interesting ones for me. In heavy industry sites, the reason I personally at least don't hang around big yellow machines is because I don't want to be run over. But if I know that machine is always going to stop, there's no reason for me to change my behavior. I'll walk wherever I feel like.
Yeah.
And you actually weirdly make the problem worse in safety because everybody knows they don't have to change their behavior. And you're punishing the operator for the behavior of somebody else. Now, is that fair?
Interesting.
The final reason, which we've already spoken about, is the risk of false positives or the AI not understanding something. And the classic one is high vis. So you don't want to be shutting a machine down because somebody's hung their high-vis jacket up there. What you want to do is alert the operator. They are not psychopaths trying to run their colleagues over. They simply didn't know that somebody was there.
Yeah.
If they knew that, they would put their foot on the brake. So I am very much in favor of AI systems like ours being used as assistive tools, not taking control. Now, in mining, they've got a different view. There's a program called Immersed Level 7, 8, 9, and 9 is full autonomy, and they do shut machinery down. So there is this tension of how good does the AI need to be, and in what scenario is this actually going to work, versus all these other, legal, operator, practical considerations.
Yeah.
And back to your CRV, it could effectively be an autonomous vehicle.
Yep.
Except for the scenarios that it doesn't know. And it's that 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, where you're in the back seat, eating cereal or reading the newspaper, and it all of a sudden says, I don't know what to do at 100 kilometers an hour, and you crash. So heavy industries are very difficult because we've got all these edge cases. And that's why I generally err on the side of helping an operator or helping a person to do their job, not taking their job away from them.
Yeah, fair enough. Because if the machine does take control, then it's the 1 in 100 case would always make the newspapers.
Yes.
The 99 times you'll never make the newspaper, but that
Yep.
one time you'd make the newspaper. And it's interesting, isn't it? It's really interesting. Yeah. Kieran, why are you focused on safety from an AI perspective within your company?
So our origin at Langerock, I'll rattle off the Australian numbers. Apologies, I'm not sure what the New Zealand numbers are. You probably know. But in Australia, it's between 150 and 200 fatal accidents and 100,000 serious injuries in the Australian workplace every year.
Wow.
65% of those are the heavy industries broadly defined, but it's basically construction, logistics, and agriculture, forestry. Of those, 65% again are being hit by a vehicle. So 2/3 of the Australian workplace fatalities are caused by being hit by a vehicle. And the majority of those are in construction and logistics. So there's a pretty clear problem here.
Yeah.
And that was our focus. This should not happen anymore. I mean, we're almost in 2024. So what can we do about this? And we went through many different things at Langerock. The hierarchy of controls, obviously there should not be a person and a vehicle next to each other. We all can have a good laugh and move on. That's, the real world is there are people and vehicles in proximity.
Yep.
Then we looked at passive devices. And these are things like reversing cameras, some of the new machines, 360-degree cameras. And that's great if you are looking at the camera or at the screen.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is when you're driving an excavator, it's very different than driving a car in reverse. When you're driving an excavator, you're looking out the front at the bucket. You're not looking at a screen that's down here in a different head position. Mm-hmm. And these days, they're cramming more and more screens into the cabs. So there's 10 different screens. Which one am I looking at? I don't know. And if you quietly talk to the operators, they'll tell you they don't really look at the screens that often. They're very good at their job, and their job is to look out the front and dig the hole. So how do we proactively do something about this? Notify them to look at the screen. And there are a couple of different options. There are the very expensive mining systems that are based on high precision GPS. And these are placed in all the vehicles, and they know within centimeters where they all are. And so you can do collision avoidance systems using those. So those are your CAS systems on mine sites. They don't work with people because the person doesn't have a high precision GPS system on them. Mm-hmm. And they're also expensive, so it doesn't filter down into construction and other agriculture, those sorts of industries. So your options are, you could have a radar-based system, so that's a proximity system. And that will tell you that something is 10 to 30 meters away from you. Yep. But it won't tell you what that object is. And in heavy industries, everything is 10 to 30 meters away from you. That's just what our industry is like.
Yep.
So you just get lots of alerts, and it's annoying. The next one that people look at are tag-based systems. And this is where you would physically be wearing an RFID tag generally.
Yeah.
And you're detecting that tag from the machine. And they work actually really well in controlled environments. So underground mining and some logistics operations, because within reason, they can see through walls. And that, as I said, works really well. The downside of them is that they become logistical problems because you need to keep track of the tags. Roughly 20% of construction accidents involve the general public who would never have a tag.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the unique problem in heavy industries of the subcontractor model, where you've got 3 subbies in a row. They would all have to have the same tag system, otherwise their tags don't talk to different machines.
Yeah, they have to be in the same system.
Exactly. So that becomes problematic because you'd effectively have to mandate a single system across the entire country or your supply chain.
Or for one project.
Yeah, indeed. So the third option is...
That's not very uncommon, though.
It becomes increasingly problematic because the subby might be on site for 2 weeks, a month.
Yep.
And you're saying to them, I need you to put this widget onto your machine for 2 weeks.
Yep.
And then the question is, who pays for that? And it always in construction comes back to who pays for what.
Okay, so then that's a very interesting question, right? And that would come back to who carries the most risk, and that'll come back to the main contractor.
Yes.
So why wouldn't the main contractor pay for it to improve safety standards on site?
So it logistically doesn't work because everybody starts losing tags.
Yeah.
And this is the exact problem that we had. So the third option is infrared. It relies on the reflection of high vis. But I obviously have a vested interest. That's why we developed this technology. The issue with those is that they are operator alerts. So they will flash a light, they will yell at the people around them, whatever alerts you want to use. It turns out the issue that we've got is we don't understand safety because we don't capture the near misses. We don't have a picture or a video of anything that's going on. So all you end up with is the fact that you have a log that says, I had a detection, yesterday. What was that? Give me a picture, give me a video, give me something that I as a person can look at and understand what's happening so I can talk to the work crews. And that was how we ended up going down this route, which is I need a system that doesn't rely on any special tags or markers, so that it just works for everything. I need it to only identify the objects that I care about, people and vehicles, for example. So I need an AI system to differentiate what those are. I need a vision-based system because at the end of it, I want a picture or a video of what on earth that thing was so that at head office, I can sit there and figure out what's going on. And I need it connected because I'm not going to go run out and plug a USB stick into every machine every day to try and collect the data.
Okay.
So that was the path that we went down. And the only thing that solves this is the new generation of AI vision systems using neural networks because they can do all that. And that's what's changed in the last 3 years, is that there's now enough processing power to do it. So that was the origin of why we do safety and how we ended up doing that. We didn't pick a cool technology and then figure out what we're going to do with it. It was actually trying to solve the problem of safety in heavy industries right from the start.
Yep, and making construction sites and the heavy machine industry a safer place to work in.
Yeah, I mean, it's our AI engineers and the entire team like knowing that we're building something that's useful and hopefully everybody gets to go home at the end of the day.
Yeah, and everybody has a right to go home at the end of every workday.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, mate, that's such a cool vision, dude, and I'm excited to see what else you've got cooking in your little shop. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Kieran, what are the challenges to safety technology adoption in the construction industry?
There are quite a few. And I think we can be blunt. The first one,
go.
Safety doesn't make anybody any money. So the question is always, who pays for this? Now, yes, it's like insurance. If something does go wrong, it becomes very expensive and incredibly difficult for all involved. But it is a cost center, not a revenue generator. The other considerations are, we've talked about the subcontractor model a lot.
Yes.
It's a lot easier if you've got the same machine on the same site, the same operators and crew for 20 years running around a yard. That is not what happens in construction.
No.
So how does a subcontractor who's got a fleet of 100 vehicles, who only puts a digger on site for a week, stomach the cost of any system going onto their machine if they can't amortize the cost over multiple projects? And this is a big challenge. Safety has to be led by the big contractors and the clients.
Yep.
There needs to be a ring-fenced budget for safety and innovation and doing something differently. Because unless the cost of something is built into the budget, it will not get up. So if you come to a project that's already started and you say, whatever the cost is, it's X dollars, they say, well, it's not in my budget already, so I can't afford it. So you need to get it into the budgets to start off with, which means you've got cycles of sort of 2-3 year major projects before it comes in. So you're relying on, in the early days, ring-fence budgets of safety and innovation to start the introduction so that 2 or 3 years later it can be introduced. So my view is the only way safety gets introduced into these projects is through mandates by the tier ones and the clients. And ultimately it is the client who pays for it. So the question is, what's in it for me as the individual? You have to be able to answer that question. So the operator has to say, I can see the benefit in this because I don't want to run my colleague over. Somebody has to be looking at the data. So there has to be a safety person on site or somewhere saying, I see the value in this. I want to look at this data. I want to do something with it. The client has to say, I see the value in this because our sites are safer. We can understand our near misses. We can implement changes so that we don't have a potential accident. Construction is very difficult because of this episodic nature of the works that we do and the supply chain that we have. What we've decided to do is the systems that we have are relatively inexpensive. They are by no means cheap. It is new technology, but we offer wiring kits and things like that. So you can wire up a machine, but you don't have the expensive bit plugged in until it's required. So there are things like that we can do, but it sort of mimics the introduction of machine control systems from 10, 15, 20 years ago, where they're sort of $100,000 a pop for grade control. Yep. That is now the expectation, and that is basically you can't get on site without them. So over the next decade, that's probably what will eventually end up happening.
Yeah. So how do you then influence this mind shift within the leaders in the safety, in the construction industry when it comes to safety? You said the driver operator has to care. That's all I heard, right? The manager has to care. The construction company has to care. The client has to care. Everybody has to care. Yes. Yeah. How do we get to that mind shift change within the construction industry specifically?
So I think everybody understands the problem.
Yep.
There are lots of potential avenues. The hierarchy of control says that we should eliminate people in vehicles being close to each other anyway.
Yep.
And I fully support that. That is, the bottom of your pyramid.
Yep.
The first thing I would say is this is new technology, and I don't think people are even aware that really it exists and the capabilities of it. So the first thing is getting out there and educating people that this actually exists. But the real challenge, exactly, go to events, explain it, play with it. It's once you get your hands on it, you can understand what it's doing. And what very quickly happens is people go, I can see how this works, but actually, could you also do this with it?
Yeah.
Could you do this? Because as I said, all the other applications that we've talked about already. And that's the way to do it. But it is a challenge because the margins and risk profile of construction in particular, low margins, high risk, there needs to be somebody brave. And there are those companies. So in Australia, we're working with some great companies. Mining is leading the way. We've got materials companies who are feeding into construction. We're very fortunate to be spun off from Langer Hawke. So Langer Hawke has a lot of systems pioneering this. And people are gradually accepting that being run over at work is no longer acceptable. So what are we going to do about it? And if you can make it easy, and that is the critical thing, every system that comes in, somebody has to do something. Somebody has to own it. It's another job for somebody. Yeah. Can you just take care of it? So where we will ultimately be going is we want this being built into machines so that you just buy your next loader and it has the system inbuilt.
Yeah, it just becomes like your GPS now. GPS didn't exist 5 years ago, and today every car has an inbuilt GPS.
Yeah, so a hire company used to have to pay $10 a week for the GPS.
Yeah.
Now it comes as part of the machine.
Yeah.
So that's where eventually this will go. But we're in that early phase of educating people, making people aware that this is now available, and understanding what is capable and what the data is that you can get out of it, so that in 10 years' time, it's sort of a no-brainer.
Yeah, mate, interesting. I'm sure you'll succeed in your initiatives, man. This is
Thank you.
cool shit you're working on. I really think it's cool. Yeah, with some interesting challenges, but it's really cool. Kieran, what are the implications of AI vision on safety?
It's a really interesting question.
Yep.
This is new technology, and I don't think we've thought this through. I certainly don't have all the answers.
Yep.
But I do have some things I'll flag. There are some fairly obvious ones to do with insurances. I naively was talking to an insurance company and asked, would this decrease your insurance premiums if you got this kind of technology to improve safety and therefore your risk profile and number of accidents? And they laughed and said, no, it will increase your insurance premiums if you don't have it. So at some point, it'll be economically, it would be more expensive to not have these kind of safety systems, whether it's ours or anybody else's, than it will be just due to insurances. So that's kind of step one. The second one, in Australia at least, we have the new industrial manslaughter laws, and it's no longer enough to be reactive. You have to be proactive.
Can you just explain for the listeners what the manslaughter laws actually mean?
Yeah, so the industrial manslaughter laws.
Simple terms.
I'm certainly no lawyer, so at a very high level, from a simple engineer, the directors are now also personally liable, and you have to be proactive in that. You can't say, I didn't know. If a system, I think the word that they use is practicable.
Yeah.
So if it's economically viable, if it's technically viable, all these sorts of things. So if a system was $1 million, that's not economically viable. If it took you 3 months to install and train, that's not viable. But if a widget is $10,000 and it took you a day to install, if it's 5,000, at some point it's practicable. So it gets to the point where you have to have it, because if you didn't, then the industrial manslaughter laws, if you ever had a serious or fatal accident, unfortunately, the directors are now liable for that, as well as the company.
Right, interesting.
So you get this interesting...
The directors are personally liable?
Yes.
Wow, that's cool. I didn't know that. Yeah.
So that is a engineer's oversimplification, but that's the sort of that's the
disclaimer.
Idea.
The disclaimer. The engineer's view of the manslaughter laws.
So that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
The other one that I find fascinating is, what is safe? And it sounds like a really obvious question. But if I take 10 videos at random from our blind sight systems on machines, and I give them to work crews, and I give them to the safety team, and I give them to executive, and I say, tell me, is that safe or unsafe, or risky or not risky, or whichever synonyms you prefer? Those three groups of people will not put them in the same buckets.
Okay.
And why this is problematic is now there is no universal view within that same company about what constitutes safe and unsafe. Because there has to be agreement on that, because as you go through and review all our detections, they all come streaming in and you can put them into categories. Who does that? And what is the objective standard that they are using to decide that? I don't know the answer to that, and every company will be slightly different. So if I talk to above ground mining operations, if you get within 10 meters of that machine, that's sort of the end of you. If you're in underground mining operations, if you're within a meter, as long as you're a meter away from that machine, that's okay, because the tunnels are very narrow.
Yep.
So you got the same industry, mining, who's saying 1 meter versus 10 meters. When you're talking to rail teams, anything past a slew radius on a high rail machine is essentially irrelevant, because it can only go backwards and forwards and slew. So that might be 3 or 4 meters. So it's very difficult to decide what safe is, because if you're basing it purely on distance, there is an example of 1, 3, 4 to 10.
But then hang on, they're just industry specific constraints that you work into. Yeah.
So
and a system has to cater to an industry specific constraint.
And they do, but if you've got a company that's doing roadworks, and they're used to people being around a couple of meters. And they're also trying to review, a loader on site, and they've got 8-meter exclusion zone. Are you saying that the loader that working on a road site is safe because you're 2 meters away from it, but a loader working at an aggregate site is safe because you're 8 meters away from it? It's the same machine doing the same job.
I see your point.
So yes, you're right. Each industry and each vertical and each sort of activity uses their machine slightly differently, but fundamentally it is still a loader and you're within X number of meters of it. So this is what is safe is an interesting and more complicated question that I sort of imagined. And then you get onto the issue of whose fault is this or whose problem is this? So if you're the safety team, there's a couple of considerations. You are reporting that your safety metrics are, your accident frequency rate is X. Now, based on a couple of reports I read, 25% of accidents are not reported. And therefore, how many near misses do you think are reported? I would suggest it's close to 0.
Yeah.
So if you're reporting your numbers as X, but the real number is 100X, and all of a sudden you start reporting those, there are going to be questions asked by executive. What happens to bonuses? What happens to KPIs and things like that? They all need to be reset. But we'll go one step further in construction in particular. If you're reporting your safety metrics as X, and all of a sudden you start reporting 100X, as a subcontractor who has to submit their safety data to the tier 1 when they're bidding, you're never going to win a job because you're viewed as unsafe. But actually, you're the only one reporting the real numbers.
Yeah.
So you need a sophisticated client to realize what's actually going on here. You're just reporting the automated numbers versus somebody who is reporting it based on the piece of paper that somebody filled in once a month.
This quantum shift's bound to happen, though, as soon as you automate the system. It will happen.
But you don't want to be first because you're trailblazing, and are you going to win any work as a subcontractor? So you've paid all the money for the system, and all of a sudden the tier 1s don't want anything to do with you because you look unsafe.
And
so there are considerations.
And you're being punished for being the first and honestly reporting.
Exactly. So there's those sorts of considerations as well. And I don't know the answers to any of those questions, and I'm sure people who are listening will have many more ideas about when you start to automate these things. One of the biggest issues that I've found is when you have a near miss, however you want to define that, the typical response is everybody flies into site and they'll do an investigation. And as far as I can tell, it always boils down to operator said one thing, person on the ground said another thing, and nobody really knows.
Yeah.
That report gets written up and put on the CEO's desk because they have to sign off on it. I'm here to tell you that based on what we've seen, that there'll be a near miss broadly defined from every machine, every hour of every day. So your entire safety process is broken. So which do you actually review, and which do you have to fully investigate versus which ones can you just look at and go, okay, I can see what's happening here.
Yeah.
Because if you have a rule that says 5 meters is my exclusion zone, and anything within that constitutes a near miss, that is an unworkable safety system now because you're actually getting a video recording of every single one of those.
Yeah.
So what is your safety process? I don't know. And every company will come up with something slightly different.
For sure.
The CEO can't sign that off.
But at the end of the day, you just get back to the root cause of why we're doing all of this. One is to get people to their houses safely and to influence better behavior on site to keep everybody else around you safe. Those core objectives never change, though, do they? Doesn't matter what stats you collect. Doesn't matter what you do with the data. That's great. This is what you're trying to do. You're trying to get everybody home. You're trying to influence good behavior on site.
Exactly right. And the processes that we have set up as an industry are probably not going to satisfy the requirements of those 3 things when you can start to automate all of this capture. So that's what I want, is for everybody to understand the risk and to see immediately it's that machine, it's that operation, it's that whatever it is, so that they can change the root cause. In an ideal world, we have no detections, you don't need our system.
Yeah.
I would love for that to be the case. No detections is the end goal. We will try and make it as easy as possible for people, but this is a fundamental shift in the near term for what people and how they think about safety.
Yeah.
So the safety teams and how people are thinking about safety It's gone from a manual paper-based process to a fully automated thing with videos of everything.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of a shift.
Yeah, massive shift. Yeah, mate, the work you're doing is super impressive. Like, this is crazy cool. I wish you guys all the best, and I'm sure you'll succeed. Just from what I've heard today, I'm sure the listeners will agree too. And hope you get the reach in the market, and some New Zealand companies reach out to you now, and
Thank you.
And adopt your system. You know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, as I said, it's always nice to be making a system that makes sure that people go home safe.
Yeah, it's quite important, isn't it? No. Okay, sure. Cut there. Did you have any questions for me?
I don't know. What do people normally ask you?
I don't know. Were you?
I don't know. What question will I have for you?
You don't have to. You don't have to. Only if you wanted to. Because I'd love to throw something personal in there, because you keep talking about only podcast and construction, and it gets pretty boring. You have a very niche market that listen to it. So normally chucking a little bit of rugby, a little bit of, I don't know, something else in there.
No, I can't talk about that because we lost.
No.
I'm claiming a moral victory though, because we played most of it with a man down. So
yeah, well, you won the Cricket World Cup. Just saying.
I'm very much New Zealand when it comes to sports, because the Australians not so good at rugby. That's all I really care about.
No, rugby's all you care about. Fair enough. Now, if there's nothing else, I'm happy to kind of stop the recording now.
Is there anything else? Anything we've missed? Is that long enough? Is it interesting enough?
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. There'll be some really cool 1 minute snips that come out of it, and I'm sure the team will pick it up and do what they normally do. Hang on.
Okay.
Let me just stop the recording.
Do you need any pictures or videos or